the golden cage Preston Dalton stood on the terrace of his Silicon Valley mansion, surveying the sprawling estate below with the same detached satisfaction he felt when reviewing his company's quarterly profits. At 32, he had everything. Wealth could buy a tech empire built on artificial intelligence, a home that resembled a modern art museum, and a social circle that included entrepreneurs, celebrities, and trust fund heirs who treated life like an endless game. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the infinity pool where his friends gathered, their laughter echoing off the glass and steel architecture. Preston adjusted his designer watch, a limited edition piece worth more than most people earned in a year, and smiled at the absurdity of it all. Money had always been his language, and he spoke it fluently inside the mansion. Camila Reyes moved silently through the marble hallways, her arms laden with fresh linens. She had perfected the art of invisibility over the past 3 years, learning to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to clean without leaving a trace of her presence, to exist in the spaces between their lavish lives. Her uniform was simple and pressed, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression carefully neutral. At 28, Camila carried herself with a quiet grace that seemed out of place in a housekeeper's uniform. There was something in the way she moved, a fluidity to her gestures that suggested a different story, a different life. But no one in the Dalton household had ever asked about her past. She had never offered to share it. The bet later that evening, Preston's private lounge filled with the usual crowd. Blake Henderson, a venture capitalist with more money than sense, sprawled across a leather sofa, his third cocktail already half empty. Natalie Ashford, an influencer whose family owned half the commercial real estate in Los Angeles, perched on the arm of a chair, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen as she documented every moment for her millions of followers. "The Rosewood Charity Gala is next week," Blake announced, swirling the ice in his glass. "Same boring crowd, same predictable conversations. We need something to make it interesting." Preston leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "A challenge," Natalie chimed in, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Something that will give everyone something to talk about for months." Blake sat up, inspiration striking. "Remember last year when Senator Crawford brought his personal chef? Everyone thought it was eccentric but charming." He paused for effect. "What if Preston brought his housekeeper as his date?" The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter. Natalie nearly dropped her phone, her perfectly applied lipstick stretching into a wide grin. "That's brilliant. Can you imagine?" The looks on their faces, Preston felt a rush of amusement at the audacity of it. The Rosewood Gala was the most exclusive event of the season, where Silicon Valley royalty mingled with old money families and entertainment moguls. Bringing household staff as a guest would be the ultimate social experiment, a joke that would echo through their circles for years. "I'll bet you $50,000 you won't do it," Blake challenged, extending his hand. Preston didn't hesitate. He clasped Blake's hand firmly. "You're on." The invitation. The next morning, Camila was arranging fresh flowers in the dining room when Preston appeared in the doorway. She looked up briefly, acknowledged him with a polite nod, and returned to her task. In 3 years, she had learned that Preston rarely sought her out directly. Usually, his requests came through his assistant or housekeeper, manager, Camila. He said, his tone casual, but carrying an undertone she couldn't quite identify. "I need to speak with you." She set down the vase and turned to face him fully, hands clasped in front of her. "Yes, Mr. Dalton." He pulled an embossed invitation from his pocket, the heavy cardstock gleaming in the morning light. The Rosewood Estate logo was pressed in gold foil at the top. "There's a charity gala next Saturday. I'd like you to attend as my guest." Camila blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dalton. I don't understand." "It's quite simple," Preston continued, enjoying the confusion on her face more than he should. "You'll accompany me to the event. Consider it a work assignment, if that makes you more comfortable. I'll arrange for appropriate attire and everything else you'll need." Her mind raced through possible explanations. Was this some kind of test? A bizarre requirement of her employment? She wanted to refuse? To maintain the professional boundary that had kept her safe and invisible for so long? But refusing a direct request from her employer could mean losing the job that paid for her younger brother's medical treatments, the job that kept a roof over their heads. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Dalton," she said carefully, "but I'm not sure I would fit in at such an event." Preston's smile had a sharp edge to it. "That's precisely the point. It will be memorable." The words hung in the air between them, and Camila felt something cold settle in her stomach. She understood then, with perfect clarity, what this was. She was a prop, a punchline to a joke she wasn't privy to. The realization stung, but it wasn't surprising. In her years working for wealthy families, she had learned that to them, people like her were often just part of the scenery. "Will that be all, Mr. Dalton?" she asked, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "That's all for now. My assistant will coordinate the details with you." After he left, Camila stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the opulent furnishings and priceless art that represented a world she would never truly belong to. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface of the mahogany table. A woman in a gray uniform. It's invisible and disposable. But there was something else in that reflection, too. Buried deep beneath years of survival and sacrifice. A spark of the girl she used to be, the one who had once commanded stages and earned standing ovations. Before life had taken everything and forced her to start over, echoes of the past that night. In her small apartment across town, Camila sat. On the edge of her bed, staring at a framed photograph on her nightstand. The image showed a younger version of herself in a flowing costume, mid-leap in a dance studio, her face radiant with joy and passion. Next to her in the photo stood Professor Helen Cortez, her mentor at the Juilliard School, the woman who had discovered Camila's talent in a community center in Houston and changed her life forever. "You have something rare, Mia," Professor Cortez had told her on the day Camila received her full scholarship. "It's not just talent, but soul. When you dance, you tell stories that words can never capture. Never let anyone take that from you." But life had other plans. A car accident had taken her parents 6 years ago, leaving Camila as the sole guardian of her younger brother, Diego, who had been paralyzed in the same crash. At 22, she had withdrawn from Juilliard in her final year, giving up her dreams to become Diego's caretaker and provider. The surgeries, the physical therapy, the specialized equipment had cost everything. Dance became a memory, a ghost of a life she could no longer afford to live. She worked 3 jobs that first year, barely sleeping, barely eating, until she finally found stable employment as a housekeeper for wealthy families. The pay was better, the hours were long, but consistent, and it allowed her to care for Diego while he finished high school. Now 20 years old, Diego was in community college, studying computer programming, determined to build a life despite his challenges. Camila traced the edge of the photograph with her finger. She hadn't danced in 6 years, hadn't allowed herself to even think about it, because the pain of what she'd lost was too overwhelming. Dance had been her identity, her purpose, her language, for expressing everything she felt but couldn't say. Giving it up had felt like losing a part of her soul. Now, looking at Preston Dalton's invitation, sitting on her small kitchen table, she felt something unexpected stirring inside her. Anger, yes, but also something else. A tiny flame of defiance. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted to laugh at the hired help pretending to belong in their world. Maybe it was time to remind them that worth wasn't measured in bank accounts and social connections. Maybe it was time to show them that the woman they saw as invisible had once moved audiences to tears, had once been called a prodigy, had once held dreams bigger than their mansion could contain. Camila picked up her phone and called Diego. "Hey, Cammy." His warm voice came through. "Everything okay, Diego?" she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Remember how you always said I should dance again? That I should never have given it up?" "Every single day," he replied softly. "I think I might need your help with something," she said, looking at the photograph of her younger self. That girl who had believed anything was possible. "It's time to dust off the old skills." Diego's excited response made her smile for the first time since Preston's invitation. Whatever happened at the Rosewood Gala, she would face it on her own terms. They thought she was a punchline to their cruel joke, but Camila Reyes was about to remind everyone, including herself, who she really was. The next morning, when Preston's Assistant called to schedule her fitting for the gala. Camila accepted with quiet dignity. But inside, something had shifted. She wasn't going as their victim. She was going as herself, finally, after 6 years of hiding. And when the moment came, when they inevitably tried to humiliate her for their entertainment, she would show them something they had never expected. She would show them her truth, her gift, a part of herself she had buried but never truly lost. The girl in the photograph seemed to smile back at her, encouraging, believing. Camila carefully set the frame back on her nightstand and began to plan. The stage was being set for a performance that would change everything, though no one knew it yet, least of all Preston Dalton, who had just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life: arrival at the Rosewood. The Rosewood estate gleamed like a jewel against the twilight sky. Its classical architecture illuminated by thousands of strategically placed lights. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, their doors opened by white-gloved attendants as guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos made their grand entrances. Cameras flashed as local media captured the arrivals of tech billionaires, entertainment executives, and members of California's most prominent families. Camila sat in the passenger seat of Preston's silver Bentley, her hands folded carefully in her lap. The stylist Preston had hired had transformed her appearance with a deep emerald gown that hugged her figure elegantly before flowing to the floor. Her hair was styled in soft waves that cascaded over one shoulder, and subtle makeup enhanced her natural features. The woman in the mirror had looked almost like her old self, the dancer who once commanded stages with confidence and grace. But beneath the beautiful exterior, her heart hammered with nervous anticipation. She knew what awaited her inside. Preston glanced at her as they approached the entrance. "Ready for your moment in the spotlight?" Camila met his eyes steadily. "More than you know, Mr. Dalton." Something in her tone made him pause, but before he could respond, the valet opened his door. The show was beginning. As they stepped out of the car, heads turned immediately. The whispers started like a wave, spreading through the crowd gathered near the entrance. Camila kept her chin high, her posture perfect as years of dance training took over. She had performed before audiences of thousands. She could survive one night among the wealthy and privileged inside the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd. A string quartet played softly in one corner while servers circulated with champagne and delicate appetizers. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the underlying current of social maneuvering that defined events like this. Blake Henderson spotted them immediately and made his way over, barely containing his amusement. "Preston, you actually did it." His eyes swept over Camila with undisguised mockery. My, doesn't she clean up nicely?" Natalie Ashford appeared beside him, her phone already raised to capture the moment. "This is absolutely priceless. Wait until everyone sees this." She circled them slowly, documenting from every angle. "Tell me, Camila, do you usually attend events like this, or is tonight special?" The question was laced with condescension, designed to highlight her outsider status. Around them, other guests had begun to notice, their conversations dropping to whispers as they recognized the social disruption Preston had introduced. "Tonight is very special," Camila replied calmly, refusing to give them the discomfort they expected. Preston guided her deeper into the room, his hand on her lower back in a gesture that appeared chivalrous but felt possessive. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, hear the buzz of gossip spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The whispers begin near the bar. A group of society women made no effort to lower their voices as Camila passed. "Is that really his housekeeper? How absolutely bizarre. What kind of statement is he trying to make? Charity begins at home, I suppose," one of them said with a cold laugh. An older gentleman in an expensive suit approached their group, his expression curious rather than cruel. "Preston, aren't you going to introduce your date?" "This is Camila Reyes," Preston said, the barest hint of amusement in his voice. "She works at my estate." The man's eyebrows raised slightly. "How progressive of you. Though I must say, it's an unusual choice for an event like this." Camila felt the familiar sting of being discussed as though she weren't standing right there, as if her presence was so inconsequential that basic courtesy didn't apply. She had experienced variations of this treatment throughout her years in domestic service, but tonight it felt particularly sharp, amplified by the formal setting and the knowledge that she was here specifically to be humiliated. Blake reappeared with fresh drinks, his smile growing wider. You know what would make this evening even more interesting? The entertainment portion is about to begin. They're asking for volunteers to showcase talents. He turned to Camila with exaggerated politeness. What about you? Surely you must have some hidden talent to share with us all. Natalie clapped her hands together. Oh, that's brilliant. Yes, Camila, you should definitely volunteer. Show us what you can do. It's around them. More guests had gathered, drawn by the spectacle. Camila could feel the trap closing, could see the expectation in their faces. They wanted her to refuse, to shrink back, to confirm their assumptions about her place in the world. Or worse, they wanted her to try and fail, to embarrass herself for their entertainment. Preston leaned close to her ear. You don't have to do this. For the first time since she had known him, there was something in his voice that wasn't arrogance or amusement. Was it concern? Guilt? She couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. Camila turned to face the crowd that had formed around them. Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Actually, I would be honored to share something with you all. Blake's grin was triumphant. Excellent. What's your talent? Folding fitted sheets? Speed dusting? The crowd laughed, delighted by the mockery. But Camila simply smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I dance, she said simply. The performance. The performance. Ballroom fell into an expectant hush as the master of ceremonies announced an impromptu talent showcase. Camila stood near the edge of the dance floor, her hands trembling slightly as she removed her heels. Around her, guests had formed a loose circle, champagne glasses in hand, ready for the entertainment. Preston stood frozen among the crowd, suddenly uncertain. Something in Camila's demeanor had changed. The quiet, deferential woman he thought he knew had been replaced by someone else entirely. Someone who stood with the bearing of a queen. Despite wearing a borrowed dress at a party where she was meant to be the joke, Camila closed her eyes, blocking out the faces, the whispers, the cruel anticipation. In her mind, she was 22 again, standing in the wings at Juilliard before her final performance of the semester. Professor Cortez had squeezed her shoulder gently. Feel the music, Mia. Let it move through you. Dance not for them, but for yourself. For the girl who dreamed of this moment, the string quartet, sensing something significant was about to happen, began to play a haunting melody. It was a piece Camila knew well, one she had performed countless times. As the first notes filled the air, something unlocked inside her. She began to move. The first step was tentative, muscle memory awakening after 6 years of dormancy. Then the second step, more confident. By the third, Camila Reyes had ceased to be a housekeeper in a borrowed dress. She became what she had always been meant to be, a dancer. Her body moved with a fluidity that seemed impossible, each gesture flowing seamlessly into the next. She executed turns with perfect precision, her arms creating beautiful lines through the air. The emerald dress became part of the performance, its fabric catching the light as she moved, transforming her into something ethereal. The mockery died on Blake's lips. Natalie's phone dropped slightly, forgotten. Gaje as she stared in disbelief. Camila danced with raw emotion, every movement telling a story of loss and survival, of dreams deferred but never truly abandoned. She poured 6 years of silence into her performance. All the pain of giving up what she loved, all the strength it had taken to endure. Her body remembered things her mind had tried to forget, the joy of perfect execution, the freedom of expression, the power of connecting with an audience through movement alone. The ballroom had disappeared. There was only the music, only the dance, only the truth of who she was when, stripped of all pretense and circumstance, she performed a series of leaps that drew gasps from the crowd. Her extension perfect, her landing silent. She moved through classical ballet vocabulary before shifting into contemporary movements that were more emotional, more vulnerable. At one point, She sank to the floor in a gesture of grief before rising again, triumphant, refusing to stay down. Tears streamed down her face. But she didn't stop. This wasn't just a performance. It was a reclamation, a declaration, a resurrection. The transformation in the crowd, Preston felt something crack inside his chest. He was watching someone he had dismissed as beneath notice reveal depths of talent and dedication that he, with all his advantages, had never possessed. The woman he had brought here as a joke, as a prop for his entertainment, was destroying his worldview with every graceful movement. Next to him, Blake stood speechless, his usual smirk replaced by open-mouthed wonder. An elderly woman near the front of the crowd pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes glistening. "That's professional-level training," she whispered to her companion. "That's years of dedication." Others in the audience began to recognize what they were witnessing. This wasn't amateur hour. This was artistry of the highest caliber. As the music built to its climax, Mila executed a series of fouette turns, each rotation perfect, her spot precise, her balance unwavering. 32 turns, the ballet standard, performed flawlessly in bare feet on a ballroom floor. The final notes hung in the air. Camila held her ending position, chest heaving, tears still wet on her cheeks, her entire being raw and exposed before hundreds of strangers, for 3 heartbeats. There was absolute silence. Then the applause began. It started with the elderly woman who had recognized Camila's training, her clapping strong and deliberate. Others joined, the sound building like a wave. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding, many rising to their feet. The ovation grew louder, more enthusiastic, till it filled every corner of the grand space. CML slowly straightened, blinking as if waking from a dream. The faces around her had transformed. The mockery was gone, replaced by respect, by awe, by something approaching reverence. Through the crowd, an elegant woman in her 60s made her way forward. Judge Patricia Monroe, renowned not just for her legal career, but for founding the Monroe Dance Company, one of the most prestigious modern dance institutions on the West Coast. "My dear," Judge Monroe said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. "That was extraordinary. Where did you train?" Camila wiped her eyes, struggling to find her voice. "Juilliard, Your Honor. I studied there for 3 years before I had to withdraw." The judge's eyes widened with recognition. "Camila Reyes. Of course. I remember reading about you years ago. You were considered one of the most promising young dancers of your generation." She paused, studying Camila with intensity. "What happened?" "Life happened," Camila said simply. The weight of those 2 words carrying 6 years of sacrifice and loss. Judge Monroe nodded, understanding without needing details. "Talent like yours shouldn't be wasted in obscurity. I would like to offer you a full scholarship to the Monroe Dance Company, including a living stipend and performance opportunities. We have positions opening for our winter season." The ballroom erupted in another round of applause. Camila felt her knees weaken, the enormity of the offer washing over her. This was her dream, the path she had abandoned, being offered back to her in the place where she had expected only humiliation. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes." Judge Monroe smiled warmly. "The world deserves to see you dance." Reckoning across the room, Preston stood motionless, Blake's congratulations on the show dying unspoken. He watched Camila surrounded by admirers, watched her receive the recognition and opportunity that had nothing to do with him, that existed entirely in spite of him. His father, Robert Dalton, appeared at his elbow. The older man had been watching the entire spectacle from a quiet corner, his expression unreadable. "That was quite something," Robert said quietly. Preston couldn't respond, his throat tight with an emotion he couldn't name. "You brought her here as a joke, didn't you?" his father continued, his tone disappointed rather than angry, which somehow felt worse. "You thought it would be funny to parade someone you considered beneath you in front of your friends." She just showed more courage, more grace, and more genuine worth than anyone else in this room," Robert interrupted, "including my son. Especially my son." The words landed like physical blows. Preston had spent his life trying to impress his father, trying to prove himself worthy of the Dalton name and legacy. He had never felt smaller than he did in this moment. "I need to apologize to her," Preston said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. "Yes, you do," his father agreed. "But more than that, you need to understand what you did wrong. You treated another human being as a source of entertainment because you've never had to struggle, never had to sacrifice anything meaningful. That woman gave up her dreams to care for her family. What have you ever given up for anyone?" Preston had no answer. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Preston finally found Camila alone on the terrace, looking out at the manicured gardens below. She had put her shoes back on, but there was something different about her posture now. Something unbowed and unbreakable. "Camila," he began, approaching carefully. "I owe you an apology that words can't really capture." She turned to face him, and he was struck by the clarity in her eyes. There was no anger there, but no forgiveness either. Just a calm assessment. "You brought me here to be laughed at," she said simply, stating fact rather than accusation. "You made a bet with your friends that you could humiliate me for money." Preston flinched at hearing it spoken so plainly. "Yes, and I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong," Camila agreed. "But I'm not going to make this easy for you, Preston. You don't get to say sorry and feel better about yourself while I do the emotional labor of forgiving you." He nodded. Accepting the truth of her words, "I want you to think about why you did this," Camila continued. "Really think about it. Not just that it was mean or thoughtless, but what it says about how you see people who aren't in your social circle. Because that cruelty didn't come from nowhere. It came from a lifetime of believing some people matter more than others." Preston stood silent, absorbing the lesson he had never learned from his privilege. "I'm taking Judge Monroe's offer," Camila said, "which means I'll be leaving your employment. I'll work out a proper notice if you need it, but I think it's better if we minimize contact." Of course, Preston managed. "And Camila? For what it's worth, watching you dance tonight was the most real thing I've experienced in years. You reminded me that there's a whole world of depth and beauty I've been too shallow to see." Camila studied him for a long moment. "Maybe you'll learn something from this." "I hope you do, Preston. Not for my sake, but for yours." She turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the weight of his mistakes. Inside, he could see her laughing with Judge Monroe, making plans for her future, stepping into the life she should have been living all along. Preston. Dalton had thought he was creating entertainment for an evening. Instead, he had witnessed a transformation that would haunt and inspire him for years to come. The woman he had tried to humiliate had shown him the poverty of his own spirit, and in doing so, had given him a gift he didn't deserve, a chance to become better. The morning after dawn broke over Silicon Valley with the same indifferent beauty it always did. But Preston Dalton woke to a world fundamentally changed. His phone was overwhelmed with notifications, and as he scrolled through them with growing dread, he realized the full scope of what had happened. The story had gone viral. Video clips from the gala, captured by dozens of guests, including Natalie's detailed documentation, had spread across every social media platform. But the narrative wasn't what Preston had expected. He wasn't the clever prankster or the eccentric billionaire. He was the villain. Tech CEO humiliates housekeeper in cruel bet. She responds with stunning performance. Former Juilliard dancer forced to give up dreams, reclaims them in viral moment. Camila Reyes, the woman who showed Silicon Valley what real talent looks like. The comment sections were brutal. People dissected his character, his privilege, his casual cruelty. They shared the story of Camila's sacrifice for her brother. Details that journalists had uncovered through interviews with her neighbors and former classmates. The contrast between her quiet heroism and his thoughtless arrogance played out in millions of shares, likes, and outraged responses. His company's social media accounts were flooded with demands for accountability. Several business partners had sent carefully worded emails, expressing concern about being associated with someone who displayed such poor judgment and character. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. Blake had texted him 3 times, each message more panicked than the last. "Dude, we need to do damage control. This is getting out of hand." Call Me Natalie's latest post was an attempted apology that only made things worse. Full of performative regret that commenters immediately identified as insincere, Preston sat on the edge of his bed, his mansion suddenly feeling like a monument to his own hollowness. Every expensive object, every luxury, every marker of his success felt meaningless in the face of what he had done. His father's words from the night before echoed in his mind. What have you ever given up for anyone? The reckoning Robert Dalton arrived at his son's mansion at 8 in the morning, letting himself in with the key Preston had given him years ago. He found his son in the study, still in the clothes from the night before, staring blankly at his computer screen filled with articles about the incident. "Dad," Preston said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "I've destroyed everything." Robert sat down across from him, his expression grave but not unsympathetic. "You've certainly made a mess. The question is what you're going to do about it." "I don't know how to fix this," Preston admitted. "Every statement I draft sounds hollow. Every apology feels inadequate." "That's because words alone won't fix this," Robert said firmly. "You can't peer your way out of a character problem, son. This isn't about brand management. This is about who you are as a human being." Preston looked at his father, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. Robert Dalton had built his business empire through hard work and innovation, but he had also been known for fair treatment of employees, for philanthropic efforts that went beyond tax write-offs, for a code of ethics that prioritized people over profit margins. "I've failed you," Preston said quietly. "You failed yourself," Robert corrected. "I gave you every advantage in life, but I didn't teach you to value people who couldn't offer you anything in return. That's partly my fault. I was so focused on building the business that I didn't spend enough time showing you what really matters. How do I make this right?" Robert leaned forward, his voice serious. "You start by being genuinely sorry. Not just sorry you got caught or sorry for the consequences. You examine why you thought this was acceptable in the first place. And then you change, Preston. Not for show, not for the media, but because you've finally understood that other people's dignity isn't your playground." "I need to talk to Camila," Preston said. "She doesn't owe you her time or her forgiveness," Robert warned. "If you approach her, it better be without expectations, and it better be genuine." Camila's new chapter across town, Camila sat in her modest apartment with Diego, both of them staring at her laptop screen in disbelief. The video of her performance had been viewed over 10 million times. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of sacrifice and deferred dreams. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Judge Monroe had called twice already to finalize details of the scholarship and discuss her first performances with the company. A talent agent had reached out about representation. 3 news programs wanted interviews. "Cammy, you're famous," Diego said, his voice filled with wonder and pride. "Everyone is talking about you." But Camila felt strangely detached from the frenzy. Yes, the opportunity with the Monroe Dance Company was everything she had once dreamed of. Yes, the public support was validating after years of invisibility. But the experience had also opened old wounds, reminded her of everything she had lost. "Are you okay?" Diego asked, reading her expression with the intuition of someone who had relied on his sister for everything. "I'm processing," Camila said honestly. "Last night was supposed to be my humiliation. Instead, it became something else entirely. But Diego, I danced again. For the first time in 6 years, I felt like myself." Diego wheeled his chair closer, taking her hand. "You gave up your dreams for me. You never complained, never made me feel guilty, but I always knew what it cost you. You're my brother. You're worth every sacrifice. And you're my sister, and your happiness matters too," Diego insisted. "This scholarship, this chance to dance again, you have to take it. Not just because it's an amazing opportunity, but because you deserve to live your own life again." Camila squeezed his hand, tears threatening. "But what about you? The living stipend Judge Monroe mentioned will help, but I'm 20 years old." "Cammy, I have my own life to build," Diego interrupted. "I'm doing well in school. I have friends who help me, and honestly, I've been feeling guilty for years about holding you back. It's time we both moved forward. A knock at the door interrupted them. Camila opened it to find a delivery person holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. The card read simply, "Your courage inspired me. Thank you for the reminder of what really matters. Judge Patricia Monroe." More flowers arrived throughout the morning. From former Juilliard classmates who had seen the video, from community members in their neighborhood, from strangers who had been moved by her story, but no flowers came from Preston Dalton. The difficult conversation 3 days later. Preston finally gathered the courage to seek out Camila. He had learned from his assistant that she had already moved her few belongings out of the staff quarters at his mansion, leaving no forwarding address. Through careful inquiry, respecting her privacy as much as possible, he discovered she was rehearsing at the Monroe Dance Company studio downtown. He waited outside the building for hours, knowing he had no right to interrupt her practice, no claim on her time or attention. When she finally emerged in the early evening, exhausted but glowing with the satisfaction of physical exertion, she stopped short at seeing him. "Preston," she said, her voice neutral. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," he began quickly, before she could leave. "I won't take much of your time. I just needed to say something in person, not through a public statement or social media post." Camila crossed her arms. "Waiting. I've spent the last few days doing what you suggested." "Thinking about why I did what I did," Preston continued, his prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. "And the truth is, I've lived my entire life treating people as either useful to me or irrelevant. You were irrelevant, so I didn't see you as fully human. I didn't consider your feelings, your dreams, your dignity. I certainly never imagined you had depths of talent and character that put me to shame." "Is this the part where you tell me the experience changed you?" Camila asked, her tone skeptical. "I don't know if I've changed yet," Preston admitted, "but I know I need to. Not because of the public backlash or the damage to my reputation, but because I saw myself clearly for the first time through your eyes and through my father's eyes, and I was ashamed of what I saw." Camila studied him for a long moment. "You know what hurt the most? Not the mockery or the cruel bet. It was the casual assumption that my life, my worth, was so meaningless that it could be used as entertainment. That I was so invisible you never even considered I might have a story worth knowing." "You're right," Preston said simply. "There's no excuse for that. No justification. I treated you as less than human, and that says everything about my character and nothing about yours." "I don't forgive you," Camila said clearly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't something you earn by feeling sorry. It's something that might come with time if I choose to give it, and right now, I'm choosing to focus on my own life and recovery." Preston nodded, accepting her words without argument. "I understand. I didn't come here expecting forgiveness. I came because you deserve to hear a genuine apology without an audience, without any ulterior motive." "What are you going to do now?" Camila asked. "I'm stepping back from my company for a while," Preston said. "Taking a real break, not a vacation, but time to figure out who I want to be. My father suggested I volunteer, do some work where I'm not the boss, where I have to serve others instead of being served. Learn humility from the ground up." For the first time, something softened in Camila's expression. "That's a good start." "For what it's worth," Preston added, "watching you dance was the most beautiful and humbling experience of my life. You showed me that real value comes from dedication, sacrifice, and passion. Things I've never had to develop because everything was always handed to me." Camila was quiet for a moment, then said, "I hope you find your way, Preston. Not because I care about your redemption arc, but because the world has enough cruel, careless people. It could use a few more who genuinely try to be better." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Preston, thank you for one thing. Your cruel joke gave me back something I thought was lost forever. It forced me to dance again, to remember who I was before life demanded I become someone else. In a twisted way, your worst intention created my best opportunity." With that, she walked away, leaving Preston standing on the sidewalk with the weight of her words and the long road ahead of him. 6 months later, the Monroe Dance Company's spring showcase was held at the historic California Theater, every seat filled with patrons, critics, and dance enthusiasts. The program listed several pieces, but the highlight everyone had come to see was a new work choreographed specifically for Camila Reyes, titled Reclamation. Backstage, Camila stood in the wings, her heart racing with familiar pre-performance nerves. But this time, the anxiety was mixed with pure joy. Judge Monroe stood beside her, a proud smile on her face. "You've worked incredibly hard these past 6 months," the judge said. "You've not only regained your technical skills, but surpassed where you were when you left Juilliard. You're ready for this." "Thank you," Camila said, squeezing the older woman's hand. "For believing in me, for this opportunity, for everything." In the audience, Diego sat in the front row with several of Camila's new friends from the dance company. Next to him, in a gesture of support that had surprised everyone, sat Robert Dalton, who had quietly funded several scholarships at the company in Camila's honor, creating opportunities for other dancers facing financial hardships. Preston was not in attendance. He had learned that lesson at least, understanding that his presence would make the evening about him rather than Camila. Instead, he was 3 states away, working at a community center that provided arts education. 2 underprivileged children, teaching business skills to teenagers who wanted to be entrepreneurs. Learning what it meant to give without expecting recognition or reward. The lights dimmed, the music began, and Camila danced. She danced her story of loss and survival, of dreams deferred and hopes restored. She danced her love for Diego, her gratitude for second chances, her grief for her parents, her determination to honor their memory by living fully. Every movement was precise yet emotional, technically brilliant yet deeply human. The audience was transfixed. Critics who had come prepared to judge found themselves moved to tears. When the final note sounded and Camila held her ending position, the entire theater rose as one in a standing ovation that lasted for minutes. Diego was crying openly, pride and joy radiating from his face. Judge Monroe wiped her eyes, remembering why she had devoted her life to dance, to creating opportunities for artists like Camila who had something rare and precious to share with the world. Backstage, surrounded by flowers and congratulations, Camila felt a completeness she hadn't experienced in years. She had reclaimed not just her career, but her identity. Not just her talent, but her sense of self-worth. Her phone buzzed with a message. She almost ignored it, then saw it was from an unknown number. The text was brief. "I watched your performance online. It was transcendent. You've built something beautiful from the ashes. I'm honored to have witnessed your journey, even if my role in it was shameful. Thank you for the lesson. You changed my life." There was no signature, but Camila knew who it was from. She considered responding, then decided against it. Preston's redemption was his own journey, not her responsibility. Instead, she looked around. At her new life, at the career she was building, at the opportunities stretching before her. She thought of the girl in the photograph on her nightstand, the one who had once believed anything was possible. That girl had been right all along, the legacy a year later. Camila launched her own program through the Monroe Dance Company, offering free dance classes to families who couldn't afford private lessons. She particularly focused on children facing challenges similar to what she and Diego had experienced, creating a scholarship fund for students who might otherwise have to abandon their artistic dreams due to circumstance. The program was called Reclamation Initiative, and it quickly became one of the most successful community outreach efforts in the region. Camila taught weekly classes herself, finding as much joy in nurturing young talent as she did in her own performances. One afternoon, as she was demonstrating a combination to a group of enthusiastic 8-year-olds, a volunteer coordinator approached her with a new applicant for their teaching program. "He has no dance experience," the coordinator explained, "but he wants to help however he can. Says he's good with business administration, fundraising, whatever we need." Camila looked up and found herself face to face with Preston Dalton. Looked different, humbler somehow, with less polish and more substance. He didn't smile or presume familiarity, just waited for her response. "Camila," he said simply, "I know this is your space, and I'll leave if my presence is unwelcome. But I've spent the last year learning how to be useful, how to serve rather than be served. If there's any way I can help your program without taking credit or getting in the way, I'd be honored to contribute." She studied him for a long moment, seeing genuine change in his eyes, real humility in his posture. He wasn't the same person who had brought her to that gala as a cruel joke. "We need someone to handle grant applications and donor relations," Camila said finally. "It's boring administrative work, and you'll be taking direction from people who are younger and less wealthy than you. Can you handle that?" "Yes," Preston said without hesitation. "Then welcome to the team." Camila extended her hand. "But Preston, this isn't about your redemption. This is about the kids. If I ever feel like you're making this about yourself, you're out." "Understood." He shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for the chance." As Preston left to meet with the program coordinator, Judge Monroe approached Camila with a knowing smile. "That was generous of you," the judge observed. "It wasn't generosity," Camila corrected. "It was practicality. If he can actually help these kids access opportunities they deserve, then his past mistakes might serve some purpose beyond teaching him a lesson." "And if he proves himself?" Judge Monroe asked. Sila watched through the window as Preston listened intently to the program coordinator, taking notes, asking questions, his demeanor completely different from the arrogant man who had once treated her as invisible. "Then maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or absolving someone of responsibility," Camila said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's about acknowledging that people can change and choosing to let that change serve something greater than our hurt." She turned back to her class of eager young dancers, their faces bright with potential and dreams. They reminded her why she danced, why she had fought so hard to reclaim this part of herself, why the struggle had been worth it. In the end, Preston's cruel prank had inadvertently become the catalyst for something beautiful: a woman rediscovering her power, a community gaining a passionate advocate, and dozens of children finding opportunities that might change their lives. Camila Reyes had been invited to a party as a joke, treated as disposable entertainment by people who saw her as beneath them. But she had transformed that moment of intended humiliation into a declaration of her worth, a reclamation of her identity, and ultimately a legacy that would impact hundreds of lives for years to come. She had shown everyone, including herself, that true value isn't measured in wealth or status, but in courage, talent, dedication, and the willingness to rise again no matter how many times life or cruel people try to keep you down. And that was